Peace, 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 peace. How's everybody? All right, so I put together a so I'm Rashon Fuller, and I am a plant-based nutritional wellness coach, right? And I help entrepreneurs optimize their health so that they can chase their dreams in their dream body. And one of the questions that I often get is just this question around sugar, right? So the question is basically what people are wanting to understand is like, how should they understand sugar one way or another? So, in other words, is all sugar equal? What's the difference between eating refined sugar and starches, for example? Or a really good example I have here is this is gummy bears, right? 12 gummy bears, which equals one serving or 8 grams of sugar. This is an apple, which is 19 grams of sugar. So this actually has more than twice the amount of sugar as this candy. So if sugar is the problem, then this apple is less healthier than candy if we were just going by sugar. But obviously there's other components. So I use this as a good visual example. This was just water, and I added color to it, and the dye represented glucose. As soon as I dropped that glucose into this bloodstream, that's what this is representing, it was immediately absorbed. There was no delay. It was automatic, went right into the bloodstream. That is what we would call so you got to think. You have these gummy bears. So these gummy bears are 8 grams of sugar, 12 of them. This apple is 19 grams of sugar. So again, in theory, this apple is less healthier than these gummy bears if sugar was the only culprit. But it's bigger than just sugar, because here's what happens. Sometimes getting a visual of this really breaks it down. So I took water to represent our blood, right? And I dropped some food color to represent glucose. So when you're eating these gummy bears or refined sugar, cookie, cakes, right? Or God forbid, starches, white flour, white potatoes, anything high anything that's going to hit that bloodstream, right, on a glycemic index and just explode inside of our bloodstream. That's what happens when that refined sugar hits your blood. It's immediate absorption. They call it an insulin spike, sugar spike, right? And this is what happens. This is the bagel in the morning, right? This is the bacon and eggs and toast in the morning, right? This is anything sweet, and a lot of times even your smoothies, depending on what you're putting in your smoothies, and even juices if you're taking the fiber out. It's hitting that bloodstream like a rocket, and it's eventually it turns around and crashes you. So in comparison, right? Now here's the comparison. So what I just showed you is the gummy bears. 8 grams of sugar, that's how it hits the bloodstream. Now the apple, 19 grams of sugar. But let me show you how that hits the bloodstream. Here's the example of the apple. See, the apple has fiber. I took this water and I added fiber to it, right? So when I drop that same dye in there, see how long it takes to permeate into the bloodstream? The fiber creates a barrier and it causes a delay. So the sugar slowly gets absorbed into your bloodstream. This gives your body an opportunity to stabilize the energy source. Okay? So the question that I'm often asked is, what about honey? What about agave? Right? What about if I'm diabetic? What about eating different fruits? How do I balance out my blood sugar levels? Which sugar is harming me, right? Versus what sugar is bringing me the energy that's needed and being able to be converted in a healthy way, right? And I think it's essential to understand that if we're looking for optimized health. Because most of us, the biggest health mistake we make is the first meal of the day. Most of us get it wrong on that first meal of the day. And immediately we shock our bodies with a blood sugar spike. And from there, the rest of the day, we're trying to recover. That is the number one mistake that I see people make. It's not dinner, it's not lunch, right? It's that first meal of the day. And if you don't get that right, the rest of the day, you're on your heels, pedaling, trying to regain your balance. But if your first meal of the day has healthy fiber and protein and healthy fats and vitamins and minerals with a measured amount of glucose, then this is how the glucose will act in your system. The fiber will allow it to have a slow penetration into your bloodstream. So in other words, this slow release of energy, which is what the body is looking for. If the body was looking for a rush of energy, then you would not necessarily have to have a sympathetic nervous system. You would need a fight or flight system, right? A fight or flight system is when there is perceived danger or fear. All of a sudden, adrenaline is released, cortisol is released, and you get this explosion of energy. All of a sudden, you can pick up a car. A mother, if a baby is under the car, she could pick the car up and throw it. If a lion is chasing you, all of a sudden you have this additional speed. Your eyesight increases, your hearing increases, right? Your heart is pumping faster. All the blood is going to your extremities. But the body could not operate in this state permanently because it would overtax you. So the body reserves this ability to kick that level of energy in. And no different when we're consuming food, right? You want to eat in a way that allows the body to slowly release this glucose so you get steady, stabilized forms of energy consistently throughout the course of the day, not a spike and then a crash. Okay? Like you guys, I hope you guys could understand the way that I'm explaining that. And I think the visual now, here's an example, because this is the one where I added fiber to it. So it's taken quite a while for it to permeate into the bloodstream, symbolic wise. Let me show you one from last night. So I did a live last night, and here's one that also fiber was added. And at one point in time, it did look like this. But over time, overnight, I should say, it was able to permeate all the way through. And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for a quick, this is the quick explosion when we eat refined sugar. And listen, I should say this. Starches, because a lot of people's main diet is meat and starch. That's where they start with. Meat and a rice, meat and potatoes, meat and pasta, right? Meat and bread. So this white flour, this white starch on the glycemic index is more, it's more readily converted into glucose than these gummy bears, than a cake or cookies. or whatever, you know, a soda, even though those forms of refined sugar are incredibly toxic, it cannot compare to starches, specifically the white starches. A white potato, if you were diabetic or pre-diabetic, and you, one of the things that a doctor will quickly tell you to stay away from is the whites. They're going to take you away from that white potato, away from that white bread, away from the white rice. Why? Because on a glycemic index, which means the release, when you consume that, it converts so fast into glucose that now your pancreas has to release this hormone called insulin in an attempt to get this sugar or glucose out of the blood, where? Into the muscle cell, right? And when it's unable to do that, then essentially what we're saying with diabetes, what we're really saying is that you're poisoned by the sugar, right? That's the essence of it. You're being poisoned by sugar because you're not getting it out of the bloodstream into the muscle cell. And in some cases, it's because it's too fast, like in the sense of these starches and refined sugar. This spike, this sugar spike, is happening so fast and causing you to release this insulin so fast that it's throwing the body out of, out of balance. But also, sometimes in that muscle cell where the insulin is attempting to get the sugar into is blocked by fat. Okay? So those are two causes that stops or creates what they call insulin resistance in the beginning stages of it. Now, here's where it gets even deeper. Now, I'm explaining in detail what happens when you consume something like an apple, which may have even more glucose than candy in some cases, right? It's loaded with sugars, but this is nature's sugars, and it comes bodied with the skin and the meat of this apple, or the flesh of this apple, which is fiber. So when it hits the body, it has this beautiful release, and then the fiber itself feeds the microbiome. So you get 2 for 1. It slows down the glucose absorption and creates this beautiful slow release, and then the actual fiber itself feeds the microbiome. 2 for 1. What happens when you juice a piece of fruit? What happens when you juice an orange or you juice an apple and you get pure apple juice or orange juice, right? You're taking away the fiber. And I'm not building a case to say that juicing is bad, but I am saying, depending on your metabolic health, right, you have to take that into consideration, because if your metabolic health is off, then that's going to give you a rush, no different than gummy bears, right? So I just wanted to really highlight this illustration, because sometimes we need an illustration. Sorry, my light just blew out, y'all. I don't know what happened there, but gotta keep going, right? This is when glucose coming from refined sugars and starches, right? And unhealthy sugars hitting your bloodstream like a rocket, right? And this is when the fiber is in it. Sometimes we don't think about that when we're consuming, but this is what's happening in the gut, right? And this is what's going to lead to high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, and just layers of additional weight gain, right? The origin, and you hear sugar, but you don't really know the process. Like, what does sugar have to do with weight gain in particular? Because it don't seem like sugar would actually have enough calories to lead to weight gain, but that's what's happening under the hood. Okay, so now remember, the brain needs 20 to 25% of all glucose that hits your bloodstream, or it needs a lot. To run this command center, to run thought and reasoning and all the faculties of the mind, not to mention how the brain has to be the command center for all things going on in the body. So turns out it needs a tremendous amount of energy to run that. So when you're consuming food, based on the size of the brain, this is an enormous number. 20 to 25% of all glucose is absorbed by the brain. It gets its off top. Okay. So that's what scientists are manipulating when they're giving you things like this. They know that sugar in this form optimizes your brain's pleasure centers and releases what? Dopamine. It's very similar to drugs. If you think about anyone who is is addicted to drug use, right? And the different ways that they get these drugs into their body. They may smoke it. That's one way to get it into the bloodstream, right? Um, they may bring it in through the nose and all these different things, but then they have what's called skin popping, where they take these hypodermic needles and put it directly inside the vein. Why do they do that? Quick, fast, rush. And it's no different than sugar. When you're getting a refined sugar that's going directly straight into your bloodstream, it's going to release dopamine. And it's going to make the brain feel like it just got calories. So it wants more and more and more because it's getting calories and quick energy without feeling satiety or fullness. So what food scientists, has discovered that they can manipulate you through that one principle right there. Right? They can put additives in the food that is 0 calories, 0 healthy fats, 0 protein, 0 vitamins or minerals, just sugar and additives. And they can make you desire to have more and more and more. That is an incredibly insidious way that they utilize sugar. So I wanted to just really highlight that sugar is not the problem. It's the way we consume it, it's the quality of that sugar, and it's whether it's coming in nature as a whole food or whether it's been extracted from its original source, refined, and given back to you in a different form. And it is essentially poisoning us, y'all. I was reading an article yesterday on sub-Saharan Africa, like Chad, Niger. These countries have basically been able to operate with almost 0 heart disease and 0 diabetes. It was as much, they had other problems, but from a metabolic standpoint, it almost didn't exist there a very short while ago. But more and more processed foods, mainly the main thing they pointed back to is sugary beverages. Coca-Colas, sodas in general, sweet teas. These things have begun to get imported into this sub-Saharan Africa region. All of a sudden, they are exploding with heart disease, exploding with type 2 diabetes, right? High blood pressure is on the rise. Inflammation in general on the rise. All as a result of bringing in good old-fashioned sugar, right? So we have a responsibility. I started off talking about a little bit about what I do, and I generally focus on entrepreneurs because I am an entrepreneur, and I know that lifestyle. I know that the struggle and challenges that come along with it. Almost like you're never off. You're constantly, trying to fulfill this dream. You're chasing this dream outcome. And what I'm saying is, you need to chase that dream outcome with the dream body. Because the moment you lose health, game over. Everything stops. Everything stops. So if we could take a minute to turn our attention on our health, it is the greatest thing that we could do. All right. So, and sometimes it's these small, um, actionable steps that we can take. Incremental growth is the key. And this is one of those steps that you can incorporate immediately into your lifestyle. You can immediately understand the difference between sugars. So you don't have that question no more. What about honey? What about agave? Right? What about maple syrup? I know white sugar is not good, but what about this? Or what about, fruits? How should I think about the sugar that's in fruits? What about fruit juices? Is it okay to drink, the juices of these fruits? Like, this experiment that I just shared should give you clarity on that, right? Moving forward. And it's not to say don't do those things, but now you have some guidelines and you understand the consequences regardless of what decision you make, right? And you know how to protect yourself. You understand now what fiber does to glucose and how to make sure you incorporate that. Okay? I'll give you a quick example because I mentioned white potatoes earlier, right? And how that starch was so high on the glycemic index. If someone was determined to eat white potatoes, then what I would say to them is eat the skin. If you're going to eat white potatoes and you're going to ignore what white potatoes and white rice and white breads and what these things do in the body from a high glycemic index standpoint, then consume the skin with it. Because now you're getting fiber and you're getting that effect like we talked about, right? Still, you can see it hasn't permeated yet. That fiber is still stopping that glucose from being able to move throughout the whole bloodstream. Okay. But of course, this one, like a rocket. By this point, if this was your bloodstream, you'd be crashing now. First was the sugar spike, and then comes the crash. And you can experience that in so many levels. Most people might experience it as just a drop off in energy. So, real quick, I want to touch this on energy too, y'all. One of the things that I do in my coaching containers is I have my clients track energy. Because if you don't track energy, sometimes you don't really know what your regular actually is. If I was to ask you, how's your energy? You might say, my energy is fine. Because you've learned and adapted to pushing through. You have forgotten almost what you would feel like if you had optimized energy. All you know is you're pushing through because you got to keep going, right? You can't stop. It's not an option. So instead of just feeling like I'm tired, you learn to grab the coffee, grab the energy drink, grab food to stimulate yourself, right? Maybe you hit the gym, get a quick burst out of that. You've found energy sources throughout the course of the day to push you through. But sometimes you never stop to think about what is the state of my energy right now, right? How do you measure where you are versus where your energy level should be, right? So I think that's a beautiful practice to engage in and to do that on a regular basis, right? Begin assessing what is my energy currently and what is my potential. Not my norm, because if you don't know that you're low energy because you've been pushing through for so long, what's your norm versus what is your potential? And by tracking that energy throughout the course of the day, what we call energy charting, you can begin to understand like what you're capable of. Listen, there's nothing like optimizing your health, detoxing your body and begin to optimize your health, get the right vitamins and minerals into your body, and sometimes for the first time realize what you should feel like, right? It's like, oh man, I could have been feeling like this all along. Sometimes that's the vibe. So, anyways, y'all, I want to thank you guys for tapping in. This is, believe it or not, this is actually my first live on YouTube. And I really, really enjoyed this. I've not done a live on YouTube yet. So this is my first one. I hope these, these actionable steps that I drop stays with you. I hope the visual aspect of this, right, um, stays with you and culminates into an actionable step that you could use to make your life better. Where you will think about energy from a different perspective the next time you think about the difference between the sugar that's in candy, cookies, cakes, right, versus the kind of sugar that's in fruit. And even understanding that when you separate this sugar from its source, the fiber, then you're basically not too far away from this. Sugar is sugar. Your body don't discriminate the way we do in science books. Your body is not saying, hey, this is glucose, this is fructose, this is refined sugar. The body's not doing that. Sugar is sugar. But what the body does know is when you couple it with fiber, you get this beautiful slow absorption. This delayed absorption, which allows the body to stabilize the energy. That's what I hope you walk away with. Because that's the objective. Matter of fact, there's only two reasons why we eat. That's it. There's only two reasons why we eat. One is so that we can get energy. Energy to run the systems of the body. The defense system or the immune system, all of the circulatory, the respiratory system, the endocrine system, the skeletal system, all these systems, right? The lymphatic system, and keeping that waste pumping out. Thinking, all this stuff requires energy. Digestion, reproduction, energy, right? And the second reason why we eat, that's one. The second reason is so that we can repair and rebuild healthy cells and tissue. That is the only reason why we eat. So whenever you're doing something consumption-wise that is going against those two things, you are robbing yourself of your own health. You are allowing entropy in. Ooh, let me say this. Since I mentioned entropy. Entropy is a force that drags all things into chaos and destruction. It's a real law. So if you leave anything, or once you put something on this planet or something in physical form and you leave it long enough, entropy begins to act upon it. It will eventually rot it, rust it. It's going to slowly start moving itself and going to a state of chaos or destruction. That's what entropy is. There's only one thing in the universe known to defeat entropy, and that is the human cell. Ooh, boy. If you don't get nothing else from this live, I hope you get this. The human cell is designed to defeat entropy. Nothing else is. Ooh, I hope you guys get this. The human cell is designed to defeat entropy, which is the force that drags all material things into chaos. It is a universal law, no different than gravity or centrifugal forces, electricity, magnetism. Entropy is a universal law. Okay? I'll go a step deeper so you can put entropy in perspective. This is the way that they describe entropy in science. You have a glass of milk. Let's say you have a glass of milk, and child runs across the room, hits the glass of milk, knocks it on the floor, spills it, milk goes everywhere, glass shatters and go everywhere, right? So the second law of thermodynamics would describe that situation as time increases with disorder. The speed in which it took that glass to fall, shatter, break, everything to go everywhere is instant, split second. But if you wanted to take all of that chaos, the glass, the spilt milk, and put it all back together and put it back on that counter, then that would take a very long time, if possible at all. So the second law of thermodynamics says time increases with disorder. So that's entropy. That disorder is entropy. The way that glass shatters and breaks and everything, that's entropy, right? So the human cell, entropy is what we would call getting older, getting diseases and cancer and dementia. Like this is all considered a part of entropy. From the moment you're born, you begin slowly dying, is the way they say it in science, right? You are moving toward your expiration date, not the other way around. But the human cell is designed to take on damage, to take on inflammation, to take on viruses and pathogens. And no matter what comes at the human cell, it is designed to be able to reproduce itself. Every 11 months, every cell in the whole human body is new. The problem, and the reason why I wanted to explain that is we allow entropy in. Entropy is not a foregone conclusion when it comes to us. We allow the entropy in two ways. One, the way we think. Three ways. One is our thinking. Two is what we consume. And three, our environment. Those three things is the way we allow entropy in, which ultimately leads us toward our demise. And the beautiful part of that is we have some control. Right? We have some control. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to wrap that up. Again, thank you guys for tapping in. I really appreciate it. This is my first YouTube live. My light blew out on me, but we kept it going, and I'll be back. All right? But until that time, salute, peace, and namaste.